All right, today we're going to unpack a pretty sharp critique from the Italian channel Il Cammino dei Tre Sentieri. And the core argument is really fascinating. It suggests that in its big push to modernize and fight against a problem called clericalism, the Catholic Church might actually be falling into a brand new version of the very same trap.
So let's just dive right in. The whole argument we're looking at today is built around this one central contradiction. And it all kicks off with a recent event that, according to the source, just perfectly illustrates the entire problem.
The source points us to a conference planned for August of 2025. The Italian Bishops' Conference is set to get together in Benevento, and their big topic is a really serious modern crisis, the depopulation of Italy's rural areas.
And the goal here? It's pretty straightforward and practical. They want to draft a letter to the government, to lobby for policies that could help solve this demographic crisis. On the surface, this seems totally responsible, like a great example of the church getting involved in real-world problems. But, and this is a big but, according to the source we're looking at, this very event shows a deep, underlying contradiction.
So here's the twist. This critique argues that a conference on a socioeconomic problem actually shines a spotlight on a major flaw inside the modern church. And that flaw revolves around a word that gets thrown around a lot, but maybe isn't fully understood: clericalism.
You've probably heard Pope Francis and other church leaders warn about the dangers of clericalism. But the argument here asks a really challenging question. What if, in trying to stamp out one version of the problem, they're accidentally creating a totally new, maybe even more subtle, kind of it?
Okay, now this is where the argument gets really interesting. The source defines clericalism not as, say, an abuse of power or a priest being arrogant. No, it defines it as a distortion of function. It's when clergy step outside of their main spiritual mission and into roles where, this perspective claims, they don't have a specific divine mandate. And that mandate is called the grace of state. You can think of it as the special spiritual authority and competence someone is given for their unique role, in this case, being a priest.
So, this distinction is absolutely crucial. The common way of thinking about clericalism is that it's an attitude problem, a priest thinking he's better than everyone else. But this critique completely reframes it. It suggests that the new clericalism is when a priest stops acting like a priest and starts acting more like a social worker, a community organizer, or even a political lobbyist.
So to really get where this argument is coming from, we have to understand what this video says is the clergy's one true fundamental mission, the very thing it claims is being forgotten. From this point of view, the priest's essential role, the one that's powered by that grace of state, is singular. It's to be a guide for the salvation of souls. The number one job above everything else is to help people get to heaven, period.
And this story just illustrates the point perfectly. The source brings up this famous anecdote about the curé of Ars, who is the patron saint of priests. He's lost, trying to find his new parish, and he asks the little boy for directions. And in return, he doesn't offer the kid money. He offers to show him the way to paradise. For this critique, that single moment captures the absolute essence of what a priest is supposed to be.
So if that's the primary mission, you have to ask, how did the focus get so lost? How did this new, functional kind of clericalism take over, according to this argument?
Well, the argument follows a very clear chain of logic. It all starts with an assumption, which the source says comes from certain modern theological trends that, pretty much everyone is saved and goes to heaven anyway. Okay, well, if that's true, then the priest's most important job suddenly becomes redundant, right? So the clergy has to find a new purpose. And that new purpose becomes fixing the problems of this world, not the next.
And this shift fundamentally changes the priest's whole identity. He's no longer primarily a spiritual guide. The source even uses the Arabic word ruhani, meaning spiritual, to really hammer this home. Instead, he gets recast as a social organizer. His main job becomes running programs and lobbying governments, things that, the source argues, he has no special training or divine mandate for.
All right, so how does this all circle back to that Bishops' Conference on depopulation? This is the final piece of the puzzle, where the whole critique really comes together.
The source then asks a really provocative question. The bishops are treating depopulation like a socioeconomic issue that can be solved with government policy. But what if, the critique asks, they're trying to fix the wrong problem altogether?
To back this up, the video points to something that seems like a total paradox. Italy's birth rate didn't start to drop during times of extreme poverty, or even during the world wars when families, surprisingly, were often quite large. No, it started to fall right after the post-war economic boom, when life got easier and people had more money. For the source, this is proof that economics can't be the main reason.
So if it isn't economics, what is it?
Well, the argument claims the real root cause is a moral crisis, that the Church itself failed in its number one mission by not preaching the fullness of Catholic moral teaching, especially about the duty of married couples to be open to life. By staying quiet or even just going along with the world, this perspective says the Church betrayed its core function, and the depopulation crisis is one of the direct results.
So, what we've just unpacked here is a very specific and, pretty challenging critique. It argues that by shifting its focus to worldly problems instead of the salvation of souls, the Church not only misunderstands its own mission, but also ends up being bad at solving the very problems it's trying to fix. And that leaves us with a final, lingering question about the true purpose and priorities of a modern faith.